Hi, thank you so much. I want to say what a huge honor it is to have been selected um, for this TLC section of AAEA's Graduate Student Teaching Award. I was asked to give some of my advice about teaching. I think a big part of what makes me a good teacher is that I love it, quite simply, but I recognize that not everyone inherently does love teaching. So I want to frame my advice around how to learn to love teaching, or how to emphasize the parts of it that are easy to love, and how to have more of those parts of teaching. Throughout the semester. So briefly, my teaching experience, I was the lead instructor for a 250-person undergraduate survey course on development economics at UC Davis. That class was a little bit unusual in that it was taught online, entirely online during spring of 2020. So we had a rapid shift to teaching entirely online due to COVID-19. I have also been the teaching assistant quite a few times for a small upper division undergraduate course that focuses on issues of poverty and impact evaluation throughout the world. I was the first teaching assistant for this course, and so I worked quite closely with the two co-instructors to develop the course, and then I've TA'd it a couple of other times. And finally, I was the teaching assistant for an interdisciplinary master's degree course on the economics of small farms. And so that's for a master's degree in international agriculture and development offered at UC Davis. And I TA'd that course as well 3 times. So I think the moment that everyone loves in teaching is when you see the student have this flash of understanding, that suddenly something becomes clear to them that wasn't before. I mean, that is sort of the whole point. For me, that moment is a lot easier to see one-on-one than it is in a big lecture hall. So for the students that it happens while I'm lecturing, I don't necessarily get to see that happen. But that's a moment that feeds me and that keeps me coming and keeps me working at teaching. So because it's easier for me to see it one-on-one, I encourage students to attend office hours. And I do this in a couple of different ways. So quite structurally, I really emphasize in the course that my time during office hours is set aside for them as students, that no matter what they come and talk to me about, they are not wasting my time, that is what my time is for. I do this because even though I come from an academic background, and so I understand a lot of the social norms of academia, I always felt when I was an undergrad that I didn't want to waste my professor's time, that my questions that I had weren't significant enough to warrant going to office hours, that I didn't want to impose on them. And so this, I think, is even more so for students who don't have the willingness to take up time of their professors that I did when I was an undergrad. So I really want to emphasize that structurally this time is for them. Concretely, I suggest that students work on their homework in my office hours. And, if they don't have any questions, that's great. But if they do, they can ask me them. I really like doing this because it also means that students can learn from each other. So both if one student is struggling with a particular concept, then other students can help explain it to them, and thus deepening the explainer's understanding. Additionally, it allows students to see that other people are struggling with the content, and that this isn't easy for them. I think particularly in large classes, it can seem like everyone else is understanding the content when you aren't, which can be a little bit embarrassing. And so having students work in that space together is really quite useful. Another thing that we all are interested in the topics that we're teaching, and so a big part of what I try and do is emphasize going beyond the textbook. And it's so deeply fulfilling when you see a student getting really engaged with the material, and not just what you taught them, but pushing it further and thinking about it in the ways that you think about it, or in ways that you haven't thought about it before. I think, when you see them go from sort of a learner of the material to a thinker about it, that's such an exciting moment. So a big part of how I encourage students to do this is by demonstrating my own enthusiasm for the content. So in development economics classes, I encourage students to think about the ethics of these things and the effectiveness of aid and mission trips and things that are relevant to their experience. In an econometrics class, encouraging them to think beyond just what the structural assumptions about the error terms are, and think about what does this mean in practice. So not just that an instrument is uncorrelated with the error term, but what does that exclusion restriction actually mean in the real world, and how does that tie into the econometrics that we're teaching? Another way that I encourage students to think about the course content in this way is by using supplemental sources. So including current events, news, and policies that economics is so powerful and is shaping every day. And students really respond well to this, to see that what they're learning is not just abstract, that it really does affect the world, and therefore they should be thinking about it carefully, that this is about being an informed citizen. Now, all of these things, a lot of them are a lot easier in smaller settings. The relationships that are so meaningful in teaching are much easier to have in a smaller class. But by teaching this large-scale online course last spring, I actually learned a lot of lessons that I think can be brought to smaller class settings as well, to broaden who is able to experience these deep relationships. So for instance, I really prioritized having multiple platforms to connect with students, particularly at the beginning of COVID, when everyone was confused about what was going on, how we were going to do everything virtually. By opening up multiple channels of communication, this allowed students to connect with me in the ways that they were most comfortable in. So during synchronous classes, I had not only students turning on their video and asking questions in the recording, but also I had TAs monitoring the chat so that students could ask questions via chat, which was much more natural to a lot of them, and much less intimidating. I had Canvas boards going, multiple different ways for students to connect. And I think this actually opened up connections with me to a broader set of students than would normally have done so in a traditional classroom setting. Another thing that I really prioritized was intentionally bringing students into relationships. And this is not just in a totally isolated economic sense, or academic sense, but at the midterm, I asked students, how are you doing? There's a lot of chaos going on in the world with COVID-19 and working from home, and, a lot of uncertainty, and just checking in on their lives. And students really appreciated that. So that it wasn't just the students who were coming to my office hours regularly that knew that I cared about them as a person, but every single student understood that. Additionally, during COVID-19, and for an online course where different professors were doing online courses in different ways, it was crucial to set very, very clear expectations, and from the beginning. And I think my natural style might be a little bit more loose and improvisational, but this was really valuable for me in learning how many students really valued the clear expectations that I set, and consistent expectations throughout the course. That being said, I also practiced a lot of flexibility in responding to circumstances. So both individual student circumstances, and making sure that students felt comfortable to come to me with those, and that we would adapt due dates and assignments as appropriate, but also to events going on in the world, and making sure that students were aware that I was also a person in the world, and that we were all being flexible with each other. It's not on the slide, but I also would say that teaching during this quarter really stressed for me the importance of a strong support network of other teachers. So Kristen Kiesel organized an instructors coffee hour every week, where we would gather together on Zoom and share what had been going well, things that we had learned, things we were struggling with. And I found that community so, so valuable in thinking about how do I teach pedagogical approaches online, but also pedagogical approaches for large classes, which I didn't have as much experience with. And that kind of support network, I think, is also super important in re-energizing about teaching, with contagious enthusiasm. So there is this tension about clear expectations and flexibility here. Oh, my bonus piece of suggestion for online teaching was cat photos, and this was a thing that my students really enjoyed as a little bit of levity. So there's this tension inherent in clear expectations, but also being flexible. And so my final piece of advice would be to treat students as adults. So I have come to believe that there are always some students who will try and take advantage of your policies. And fundamentally, no matter how foolproof you think you've made them, they will find ways. The ingenuity of students who are really motivated to get around policies, to cheat, to, all of these things is honestly pretty remarkable. But if we design courses around these bad actors, it makes learning worse for everyone else, and it makes the process of teaching much less enjoyable for us as teachers. And so instead, by setting out expectations of students as adults who are in charge of their own education and that you are going to treat as such, with all of the attendant responsibilities and expectations, but also that, we understand that they have lives and that things come up. That this makes for a much more honest and much more enjoyable relationship with students. And so, yeah, as has probably been evident throughout this presentation, the relationships with students are, for me, the most meaningful part of teaching, and a really important part in teaching well is caring about your students. And so treating them as adults is a big part of that for me. So I just want to wrap up there and say thank you all so much. Again, I was so honored to receive this award. I wish I could have been at AAEA in person this year. Here's my contact information, and please feel free to reach out if you have any comments or questions. I'm starting at Villanova University in Philadelphia this fall. And so if you're ever in the area, I would love to see you. Thank you all so much.